August took a look at my reading over the last couple of months and said, "Hey, do you need a win?" Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife, and today I am talking you through everything that I read in August. I had one of my strongest reading months of the entire year. It may not have been so big on the quantity, but the quality of books that I read was way up at the top. I start every single wrap up with the stats of how my month went. So, in the month of August, I read 7 books and DNF'd 1. Of the 7 books that I did read, all of them were based towards an adult audience. I didn't read a single physical book across the month of August, but I listened to 4 audiobooks and I read 3 ebooks. All of that totaled up to 996 pages and 41 hours of audiobook listening. For the genres, I pretty much stayed in a very similar lane for most of August. 5 of the books that I read were contemporary or literary fiction, 1 of the books was a romance, and the other 1 book was a non-fiction book. 2 books got a 5-star, 1 book got a 4.5-star, another 1 book got a straight up 4-star, 2 books got 3.5 stars, and the 1 non-fiction that I read didn't get any star rating at all. I don't find it fair to rate non-fiction books in any way because I don't like giving a numerical value or some kind of rating to somebody's lived experience. So when I read a non-fiction book, it just gets a straight up from me. We will start with the DNF, but I'm not actually DNFing this. I think I'm putting it in the not for now category. Not for now is a softer DNF. It's something that I know will work for me, but it isn't working for me right now. So when the time is right, I'm going to go back to Such a Good Couple by Sophie White. I have loved the Sophie White books that I've read previously, but whatever the reason was for August, Such a Good Couple just didn't drag me in. I don't know if it was the situations that I was in. I feel like I was reading it a little bit too disjointedly. I don't like personally when I can only read like 2% of a book at any given time. And because I had been so busy throughout quite a lot of August, that is how my reading had been going. It's about 3 couples who have known each other for a really long time. I think they met while they were in university, and all of them are now living in very different circumstances. One couple is a parent to 3 young boys, and they are really at the end of their tether when it comes to their patience and their sanity. Another couple is desperately trying to conceive, but nothing is working out for them. And the other couple are big Hollywood it couple names, and they have got money that they can throw at everything. So the Hollywood couple invites their friends to a huge bash weekend, big blowout holiday on Cape Cod. And I am so intrigued to see how this is going to go. And any review of this book that I've read has been wholly positive. It's just that the timing didn't work for me. And so, onto the books that I did read, starting with What Happens in Amsterdam by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I was so interested in this book for one specific reason. It deals with an immigrant experience, and I myself am also an immigrant. So I had a big hope for this book that I would really see myself in the pages of it. And for some of the book, I actually did. This is about Dani, who moves on a whim to Amsterdam when her relationship with a colleague breaks down. She's not super prepared for what life in the Dutch capital is going to bring to her, and the job that she has gotten there has turned out to be a scam. So her visa is about to expire when she bumps into Wouter. He was the Dutch exchange student that stayed with her family for 6 months about 15 or so years ago, and she is surprised to see what kind of person the Wouter has grown into. He is tall, broad, and handsome, and he's basically her savior because he has got an apartment on the Prinsengracht that he has got free for her to move into. Dani and Wouter decide to get married to help them with some circumstances that are going wrong in their life. Dani needs this relationship so that she can stay in the country, and Wouter needs it to kind of prove to his family that he has grown up and to access the trust fund that has been left in his name. I thought some aspects of this were just a little bit too convenient at times. Yeah, there's a big apartment with huge floor-to-ceiling windows, and that's super affordable on the Prinsengracht, one of the biggest and most well-known streets in Amsterdam, because suddenly we are manufacturing money ourselves. The Prinsengracht is in a very affluent area of Amsterdam, so I'm not entirely sure how we've managed to get the money for this when a couple of pages ago, Dani was really struggling with her money. It was also a little bit too convenient that she just bumped into Wouter in the first place. For a lot of this book, you do kind of need to suspend your disbelief in a big manner. And for me, it found it a little bit difficult to do that at times because it was just like, oh, there's this huge problem. 2 pages later, it's already been solved. There was no real, oh my god, what's going to happen or jeopardy here. But there was a couple of things about the immigrant experience that I really connected with. In the Netherlands, it's common for apartments to be rented out without any flooring. In Germany, it's common for apartments to be rented out with no light fittings and no kitchen. And when I was looking around apartments when I first moved to Germany, and there were no light bulbs, there was nothing, there was just that little dangling wires in the ceiling, or there was no kitchen, or sometimes it was even both, that was a real culture shock for me. So I really associated with Danny when she was walking through all of the apartments and it was just concrete flooring. There was no carpets, there was no laminate flooring, there was nothing in there. That was definitely something that I felt, oh, okay, this is what being an immigrant is like. I also really like that in an attempt to help Danny learn Dutch, Wouter had put a bunch of post-it notes across the apartment, basically naming everything that was in there. So the wardrobe, the kettle, the cooker, the couch, everything had a little post-it note on it to help her learn the Dutch grammar. I thought that that was so sweet, and it was a really nice way to integrate Danny into society and to help her to passively learn the language. I know from personal experience, when you are living in the country, that is one of the easiest ways to learn the language, is just to immerse yourself in it on a day-to-day basis, but also to just have things around you that are in your target language, like labels on foods, like street names, like announcements that are in the subway station. Having that little kind of helping hand is a huge benefit when you're learning a language. Something else that I didn't really enjoy about this book, though, is Danny's relationship with her parents. Danny was born at 26 weeks, so she was quite premature, and because of this, she has got complications with asthma for quite a lot of her life. Now, her parents see this as she needs to be protected from every single thing in the entire universe ever, so they freak out when she moves to Amsterdam. There are other instances in the book where you can see that they are really infantilizing Danny, even though she is a woman approaching her 30s. I thought that this was a little bit over the top. Apart from the complications of asthma, there's no signs that Danny has been affected by being premature. And I really liked when she eventually stood up to them and made them see that she was being treated like a 7-year-old, despite the fact that she was fully adult and capable enough to move to another country, to hold down a job, and to make her own way in the world. There were a couple of times that I rolled my eyes at they weren't able to contact her for one evening, so they really thought that she had been kidnapped by a gang. Some of it was just a little bit over the top, but when your parents can be that overbearing, I understand how it feels. Like most Rachel Lynn Solomon books, this book is quite spicy, and I really enjoyed some of the smut that was in there. I thought it was well placed, it was well written, it didn't feel gratuitous, and it did feel like it was paced quite well throughout the book. Overall, I think this was just the weaker of the Rachel Lynn Solomon books that I've read, because I've really enjoyed all of her other books. This one just didn't have the chemistry that I was looking for. Then I read So Thrilled for You by Holly Bourne. This is a story of 4 women who have met each other in college and who are now gathering for one of their baby showers. It follows Nikki, the woman who is pregnant and for whom the baby shower is being thrown, Lauren, who is a new mother and is really struggling with this new role in her life, Charlotte, who is desperate to become a mother herself, and Steffi, who doesn't want to have any children and is a little bit annoyed that some of the other things in her life aren't being celebrated. There's so much miscommunication between all 4 of these women throughout this novel. At one point, Steffi shares an article about being child-free by choice, and there's a lot of this article that Steffi can really relate to. However, Lauren, who is a new mother, and Nikki, who is pregnant, have both taken offense at this article. They see that as Steffi attacking them for going down the traditional route and for choosing to become mothers, and really, really lay into her one time at the party. I thought that this was done so intriguingly, in that what you may share for one reason is taken for a totally different reason by somebody else, because they may resonate with something different in what you've said. They may take it at a completely different level because of the experiences that they have had, or because of the things that have been happening in their life. I thought that that was such an interesting way to frame it. Overall, I found things that I didn't enjoy about quite a lot of these women. Charlotte is really, really over the top here. She is desperate to become a mother herself, but when she feels like this is out of her grasp, she organizes a baby shower that is basically everything you can find on Pinterest thrown into it for Nikki. She has got an ice sculptor. She's got a peony wall that people can stand in front of and take pictures. She has got cupcakes that you bite into it and it starts gushing out like your waters are breaking. I thought that everything she was doing was just a little bit over the top. And I do understand that a lot of women struggle with trying to conceive, and who really struggle with when they can't conceive themselves will see their friends being pregnant and really don't enjoy that experience. But I just thought that Charlotte was a little bit over the top. At the start of this novel, I really could not read Lauren's things. I almost sped past most of them. First off, I don't like this idea where we're giving children quirky names. We need to remember that when we are naming babies, we are also naming adults. So when you're naming a child Woody, you're also naming a 35-year-old who might be working at a bank. Lauren has so much hatred and vitriol for almost every single person in her life, for her partner, for Woody, for her friends, for her family. And I found it so difficult to read. But as you go through this novel further, you start to read and you start to realize some of the things that have happened to Lauren that have given her this view of the world. About how difficult birth was for her, about how traumatic her experience was, and about how she is desperately trying to bring any sense of normality back to her life. I did, however, have a question that I don't necessarily feel was answered throughout this book. While I was reading it, it always felt like Woody was hungry, was tired, was cranky. And I felt that for 9 months old, there was only really talk of him being breastfed by Lauren. I am trying to remember if there was any talk of him having solid foods throughout this book. I am not a parent and I am not an expert, but I do think that by the time you are 9 months old, you should be on something that's a little bit extra to breast milk. Yes, you can still be breastfed for some of the day, but I also felt like there should have been mention of solid foods in here. And I thought that that may have been a reason why Woody was so cranky. That he was malnourished and that he was underfed and that he just needed a little bit extra in his diet. Now, as I said, not an expert, not a parent. This was just my reading of the situation. Running throughout the course of this book is also trying to figure out how a massive fire started at the baby shower. When we get to what actually happened and how the fire actually started, I will admit I was blindsided. I hadn't seen that this would have been how the fire had started, and I thought that this was a really interesting avenue for Holly Bourne to go down. I thought that this was so intriguing and such an interesting discussion of everything that we had seen throughout the novel. I have read quite a few of Holly Bourne's books so far, and I think that this is the one that has impressed me the most. It is also a really raw and no holds barred look at different aspects of parenting, about being a parent but being completely overwhelmed by it, about being pregnant, about wanting to be a parent, and about not wanting to be a parent. I thought every single aspect of parenthood was discussed here, and it was all discussed so perfectly. Then I read Ordinary Saints by Niamh Ní Mhaolón. I went into this expecting it to really hit me hard because it is a book based on a woman growing up in very Catholic Ireland, exactly as I had done. But I don't think I was ready for the emotional hard-hittingness of this. This book follows Jay. It opens when Jay is at a party and has her first kiss with another girl. At pretty much the exact same time that this is happening, Jay's older brother Ferdia passes away while he is in Rome studying to become a priest. Ferdia is an Irish name and it translates to man of God, and I thought that this choice of name for this character was so intriguing because it really shows just how important religion and the clerical life was to Ferdia and to his parents. About 10 or so years after Ferdia passes away, Jay is informed by her parents that they are looking to canonize Ferdia and to make him be a saint. They do need to have some proof of some miracles that he has performed in his life, but they are adamant that this is going to go through. Jay then has to reconcile how she lives as a lesbian living in London and living quite a secular life with the upbringing that she has had, with the teaching of the Catholic Church, and with how intense it was as she was a child. There's so much in this book that just hit me like an emotional sledgehammer. I thought that this was a fantastic representation of what it is like to grow up in Catholic Ireland. There's a lot of talk about going to Mass. There's a lot of talk about prayers. What I thought was so interesting that while they were out as a family having dinner, Ferdia was asked to say grace, and instead of saying some really long-winded poem, what he actually said was a prayer that we would have learned when we were in school before we would go out on break. I thought that this was such an interesting look at how religion has shaped him throughout his whole life. It's also a really great look at having a parent who has depression and knowing that you are not the golden child or the favourite child in the family. Jay and Ferdia's mother has suffered with depression and possible postnatal depression for most of Jay and Ferdia's lives. Jay can clearly remember coming home from school quite a lot, and her mother would still be lying in bed with the curtains closed, the room in pitch darkness, and her mother is just lying there almost motionless to the point that Jay has to make sure her mother is still breathing. I thought that that was such a harrowing passage to read, especially when you know it's from the point of view of a young child. And there are also so many instances in this novel where you just know that Jay is not the perfect child here, and Jay is not the one that her parents would have looked on as the shining example in the world. It was so interesting to read, and I genuinely thought that it was written with such tact and respect. There's also a really interesting point where Jay meets with Lindsay, who she's been going on a couple of dates with and who she's really getting to know. Lindsay is from Liverpool. Lindsay's last name is McLaughlin, and she has a really great relationship with her mother, which Jay almost immediately takes offense to, because how dare you have a great relationship with your mother, despite being brought up Catholic, when I had the exact total opposite. Jay is almost taken aback to find out that Lindsay is Catholic, despite growing up in Liverpool, a very strong Catholic hold in the UK, and having a surname of McLaughlin. This is a traditionally Irish Catholic name, so I'm not entirely sure why Jay was so surprised by this revelation. Jay herself, however, is sometimes a very difficult character to read and to like. There are a couple of instances where she is a complete bitch to her parents. When her mother had come over to London just a couple of months after Jay had moved there, Jay basically ignores her for an entire day. She doesn't go and collect her for almost 6 hours after her mother's train has gotten in. And while her mother does try and brush it off and say, "Oh, it's okay, I know you were busy," it's such a horrible way to treat your parents. And I really didn't enjoy reading a whole lot of her point of view. Yes, she has got a lot that's going on, and yes, she is quite a troubled person, but she's really difficult to be around at times. Overall, this book really did hit me like a freight train. And if you have grown up in a strongly Catholic family, if you've grown up in a strongly Catholic country with very traditionally religious roots, I think this book is going to hit you just as hard. Then I read Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell. This is Roisin O'Donnell's debut novel, but she has also got a huge catalogue of short stories that she has had published across various publications in Ireland. This is following Kira, who has been in an abusive relationship with her husband Ryan for years. After a split-second decision, she takes her 2 children, any of the clothes that she can grab with her, and they head off into the night. This is a really great look then of what it is for women who are out of the home in a way like that. They are living in emergency accommodation in a hotel in Ireland, and they have basically little money, not a whole lot to their name, and the fear that things are going to be dragged away from them at the click of a button. Every page in this novel is filled with fear and this palpable dread that something is going to go wrong. Even in the pages that Ryan isn't present, and his presence in Kira's life is startlingly worrying. He isn't physically abusive to her, but he is emotionally and verbally abusive. And in some ways, that is almost worse because of the way that he drags Kira down and keeps trying to put her down with everything he has. Kira is also pregnant with her and Ryan's 3rd child, and this is putting yet another strain on her energy, on her body, and on everything that she can do. And she's desperately looking for some kind of a job where she can get money to help tide her and her children over. She finds a job working as an English as a second language teacher because while she is a qualified teacher, she isn't able to work in any school in Ireland because she was brought up in England with an Irish parent, but she doesn't have any of the Irish language. And you do need to have a good grasp of the Irish language for you to become a teacher in Ireland. There are a couple of things that I didn't enjoy about this though. One of the students that Kira teaches one-on-one is Diego. He is working in the hotel as a porter and as a waiter, and things start to become a little bit more familiar with the two of them. I really wish that this didn't turn into a romance. I think that Kira had so much going on in her life between trying to get away from her husband, the pregnancy, and then the subsequent newborn baby that had come from that, trying to get back on track and get back on level footing. I really don't think that she needed a fresh new romance tied in here just to complicate everything further. I also felt so worried every single time that Ryan was seeing the children that he wasn't going to bring them back. Ryan was still living in their family home, and every time that Kira is there to drop the children off or to collect them, the house is basically in ruin. It is dark, musty, dirty. Everything has just been strewn around, and it isn't an environment that is safe to bring children into. But he is adamant that his children are going to be in his life and that he is going to see them. It all climaxes towards the end of the book when Ryan's actions really do become inexcusable this time, and I thought that this was written so well. There was so much fear and tension throughout those chapters where you are just trying to figure out what is going to happen in their lives. I thought that this book was written so wonderfully. It was so respectful of the situation that so many of these women find themselves in past then, as this book was set in 2019, and now, as it is in 2025, the situation has actually become worse in Ireland. And I thought that this book did that so much justice. It is a terrifying book to read. It's not one that I think I will be able to ever read again, but I am so glad that I did read it. In August, in an attempt to leave my phone to the side, I spent an entire week reading How to Break Up with Your Phone by Catherine Price and basically trying to spend a little bit less time on my phone. I did vlog this so you can check out how my progress went, but I also thought that the book was a huge help in what I had been doing. Now, I will say that quite a lot of the tips that are in there are a little bit common sense, such as charging your phone in a different room, such as putting timers on apps, such as leaving it in a place where you're not easily able to get to it when you're doing something like reading or working or gardening or whatever it is that you wish to do. There's a lot of really great tips in here though, and I really liked that at the beginning of the book, before we go into the 30-day breakup plan, there's a lot of science and figures and facts that are backing up what Catherine has been talking about. I found it really difficult to tell whether this book was based on US research or UK research because it tied both of them in perfectly. There was so much that was covered about how people use their phones, when they use them, why they use them, what using your phone or what not using your phone can do to your brain, and how it has affected our daily lives. Even though this book was written in 2018, when social media and smartphones weren't really as capable as they are right now, it still had such a big impact and it still hit just as heavy. Then I read Long Story by Vicky Notaro. This is Vicky's second book, and I also read her first one, Reality Check, back in May. I was hoping that we would see a couple of crossovers or a couple of cameos in this book, and I was really glad to see Portia Daniels, who was the main character of Reality Check, turn up here as a scripting agent, and also Desi Dolan, who is Portia's mother, had also turned up in a couple of pages too. This story is about Tara and Alex. They met each other back in stage school when they were children, and now, about 20 or so years later, they are still firm friends, despite their lives taking them in totally opposite situations. Tara is an award-winning and Oscar-winning actress, whereas Alex is a podcaster who is mainly living back in Dublin. I really loved seeing how, even despite their circumstances, their friendship was still so valid and still so strong as it had been the first couple of days. I also really enjoyed that Alex and Tara were also kind of like stepsisters or adopted found family, because Tara had been taken in by Alex's family when her own mother passed away when Tara was about 18, and her father had basically disappeared off the scene. Things are starting to get a little bit rocky in their lives though. Sean Sweeney, a hugely successful musician who also started his life out at their same stage school, is bringing out his tell-all memoir. And in this memoir, he's going to tell the story of when he was with Alex and when he was with Tara. Trouble is, Alex and Tara had had a pact not to go near Sean Sweeney, but of course, both of them did break this pact at different points in their lives. There's so much miscommunication told between the two women as they fight over this dumb-ass man who neither of them had any business fighting over, really. But when Sean Sweeney says that he still has feelings for a woman back in Ireland that he knew when he was younger, Tensions really start to rise between Tara and Alex, and their friendship is really brought to breaking point. I thought it was ridiculous that these two women in their 30s are fighting over a boy like as if they were teenagers in secondary school. But I also thought that it was a really great look at friendships and how your friendships can be tested and stretched when you are in different situations. Tara is also dealing with the breakdown of her marriage as her husband Rory has had an affair with Allegra. She is starring in an upcoming movie with him, and things have soured between Rory and Tara, but have really started to heat up between Rory and Allegra. They are in all of the gossip columns and celebrity magazines, and Tara feels like there is no escape from the downfall of her marriage and how she has basically been replaced by a younger model. I really hoped that Tara and Rory would work out what was going on between them, but stay separately. And when things started to look like they were coming back together, I started to get really annoyed with this book because I felt that Tara really needed to know her worth, and there was so much of worth about her that seeing her considering going back to her cheating husband, it just enraged me. Overall, I enjoyed my time with this book, and I thought that it was really casually written. It felt like it was written in quite a conversational style, and if that is something that works for you, this book is definitely going to work for you. It's also got all of the kind of energy of the Real Housewives and those kind of reality TV shows. So if that's your bag, this is definitely the book to go and check out. Finally, I read what is probably one of the weirdest books that I've read in my entire life, and I say that as somebody who has read a couple of Chuck Tingle books. In August, I also read Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. Now, I went into this expecting a book about a woman who really wants to fuck a plane, but it is also much deeper than that. This book is about Linda, who lives in San Francisco and is working a job as a content moderator that she really hates. To be honest, I think a lot of this job is Linda showing us that she really hates it. There are a couple of comments that Linda really lets fly through, even though she should have flagged those as hate or harassment. For instance, Linda is watching a Get Ready With Me by a young YouTuber and decides to let all of the hate comments pass through because she thinks that these comments are just from friends of the young girl and that they are just teasing her and making fun with her, because one of the responses is just the kissing face emoji. So Linda thinks that these comments are all just made in good fun and in jest, and that the young girl is in on the joke. Linda has been obsessed and also sexually obsessed with planes since she was about 13. She went on a flight with her parents once and experienced an orgasm during takeoff. Linda is now convinced that her soulmate is a plane, and the way that they are going to spend all of eternity together is for Linda to die in a plane crash on that exact plane. So she spends her entire life on Friday evenings going to a bar near the airport and watching planes take off and land and looking planes directly in the face. She also saves up her pitiful paycheck so that once a month she can actually go and fly anywhere. And she will usually just fly into the airport, hang around there for a couple of hours, and then fly back to San Francisco just so that she can get her thrill. Don't get me wrong. Concept of this book is completely bonkers. But as I said, it is not just about the plain love. It also deals with topics such as mental health, loneliness, obsession, and grief. Linda rents a tiny little room that is basically illegal but has been rented out by the Chen family. And they are happy to live their lives and just pretend that Linda doesn't exist. They don't want her to interact with them. They don't want her to have guests brought over. They basically like to just have her money and pretend that she isn't there. I really thought that their treatment of her was awful, that she would try and talk to them and just get to know them once or twice throughout the book, and they basically said to her, we really want you to not do this. We really want to just pretend that you don't exist and that you just give us your money. I absolutely hated the treatment that the Chens gave to her, and I really love that she kind of started to push back on that a little bit towards the end of the book. I really loved, though, the friendship that Linda builds up with Karina, who is another person working in the content moderation agency. I really thought that their friendship was written so perfectly. It's about a woman who has never been a friend before and who has never really had a friend before, trying to figure out how to be a friend. And yes, she does make mistakes, and yes, she does do things that she really shouldn't do. But I really thought that she was making an effort and that it was really starting to pay off. I really loved watching her integrate with Karina and her friend group. Karina's friend group has a kind of a vision board brunch that they have every 3 months where they bring together their ideas and their manifestations that they'd really like to have happen in the next 3 or so months. And when Linda is part of this and starts to see how the power of manifestation is working out in her life, she really starts to buy into it, and she really starts to put some plans into motion for how she's going to have her big dream come true. I thought that everything in this was written so perfectly. You could see some kind of vitriol between Karina and her friend group, and you could see them kind of excluding some people and bringing some people a bit closer to the fray than others had been previously. I thought that that entire friendship group was written so well. The end of the book, however, I felt it to be a little bit ambiguous. It is a little bit up to your own interpretation as to how this book goes, but I thought that it was a really intriguing way to finish out the book. Like I said, one of the weirdest things that I think I've ever read, but like a plane crash, I simply couldn't look away from it. I was drawn into this book in a way that I don't think I've been drawn into a book in a long time. And this is going to sit with me for quite some time to come. That is how my reading month went in August. How was your August reading? Is there anything that has stood out that you think we all need to go and check out too? If you'd love to leave me a comment, but you can't think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me a plain emoji. If you know, you know. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.